StrayAllDay.com.
Tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves anyone out there, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And we put all this together into one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one book. Yes, there's a hardcover book, and this daily masterclass you're listening to right now. Don't ever call this a podcast. It's a daily masterclass that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic, we're going to go into that. Today's topic is what Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, or Blue Lives Matter, or whatever Lives Matter hashtag group movement you choose to identify with. I'm going to tell you what they're both getting wrong on both sides of this. Black Lives Matter and whoever is on the opposite side of Black Lives Matter, if you happen to be on either one of these ends, I'm going to tell you what you're getting wrong here. I'm going to go over it objectively as a human being can. I'm going to go over it clearly. I'm going to hold both sides accountable for some of the things that I have heard, some of the things that I have seen, things that I have read over the last several months, for damn near more than half of 2020. All this stuff that's been going on. The conversations about race, about police, about privilege, about oppression, about just conflict overall, about politics, about the government. All these things have been going on. You know about them, whether you have picked a side or not, whether you have chosen to engage or not. You know what's going on. You know that it's going on. There's a lot of different things happening, but I'm going to get clear here and again hold everyone accountable if you happen to be on any side of this whole situation, on just for how we need to look at things in a more, first of all, maybe a more objective way is the first way I could say it, a more logical and reasonable way, a more fair way, in a way that also in a way that everyone's being held accountable for their actions, being held accountable for their positions, and in which we can have opinions. There's nothing wrong with people having an opinion. All right, every human being has plenty of them, but make sure that your opinion is based on, first of all, things that are actually true, and based on some actual evidence if you choose a side. And that's what we want to get to here today. I'm not going to give too much more of an introduction because there's plenty of meat and potatoes inside of my point. So let's get right into it. The topic, once again, is what Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter both are getting wrong right now. Point number one. Let's just say that some cop on black situation occurs. Y'all know what that means? That means a police officer engages with a black person in America, and something doesn't go the way that I don't think either the cop or the person or the public would want things to go. Meaning there's some type of enforcement that it occurs. Physical engagement occurs, whether that's a physical fight, whether it's somebody getting tased, beat up, shot, and God forbid they lose their life. And the black person is the suspect and the cop happens to be white. When that happens, it's happened multiple times that we know about, probably a whole bunch more times that we don't know about, and it's going to happen again, and it's going to be on camera, and people are going to talk about it. So let's just say one of these situations occurs. We'll talk about some that have already occurred. Cop on black situation. And here's how people react. Black Lives Matter says something like, they are killing us every day. All right, LeBron James, one of the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement, or one of the biggest voices, whether you want to consider him a leader or not, he came out and said things like, they are killing us every day. He used those phrases, they, us, and every day. All right, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But this is the type of things that you're hearing. You're hearing this from the NBA TV show crew. Jalen Rose, Maria Taylor, Jay Williams, they're coming on TV where they're talking about a basketball game, but they get to talk about what they want. I mean, they work on TV. I guess they have the right to do that. And they'll say something like, these things have been happening to us for 400 years, and slavery and the oppression, and they just go and they just take whatever this one incident is that just occurred, or if you think it was 10 incidents, you think it was 50 incidents, and they extrapolate that to say, this is happening all the time, it's happening to all of us, this is how we as black people are feeling because this is occurring, this is occurring, this is occurring. This is what I'm hearing from the Black Lives Matter side. And I'm not making a judgment here on whether it is right or wrong, or whether they're justified or not justified in saying it. I'm saying this is what I'm hearing. And I'm going to get to why I'm bringing this up in a minute. First of all, let's talk about what the All Lives Matter side says when something like this happens. All Lives Matter says something like, this is what I've been hearing. Again, if you've heard some other things, I'm sure you have, but this is what I've been hearing as a general consensus, because on social media, I try to get a healthy dose of both sides. So on Twitter, I follow people who are strong Black Lives Matter everything that comes up there using this stuff that I just mentioned. And I follow people on the other side. People who are, no, it is not like that. And they say things like, this is the All Lives Matter side. Oh, the cop, if he beat up or shot or killed a black person in a situation, we see it on video, we hear the information, oh, he probably had a good reason. Oh, this person had a criminal background. Or this person was doing something they shouldn't have done. This person was resisting arrest. This person was walking away from the cop. This person was running away from the cop. Whatever the situation happens to be. I want to make it clear that both sides are incorrect in making these generalized statements. And let me tell you why. First of all, for Black Lives Matter, it is not they killing us. All right, that's some chicken little, the sky is falling down shit that is not empowering to anyone. It's not informative, nor is it empowering to anyone. You're not informing anybody, you're not empowering anybody. And it's not going to make black people feel stronger or more safe or more empowered. And usually it's people with big voices and big audiences who are saying these things. So it's actually hurting the community when you make a statement like that. It's not they. So we can't be general and say they as in cops, or they as in white people, or they as in whatever group of people you wish to demonize by making such a statement. We got to be specific. If you want to say that a certain person did something wrong, say that. And are there people out there who do things that are wrong? Absolutely. Are there people out there who should be held accountable for the things that they do wrong? Absolutely. But we got to be very careful not to generalize a group of people just because 1 or 2 or 50 people from within that group did something that they weren't supposed to do and thus needs to be held accountable for it, whether they end up being held accountable or not. We cannot generalize the group. We can't say all white people. We can't say all cops. We can't say all politicians. We can't say all anything. And this is something that, especially if you're a Black Lives Matter individual, whether you happen to be black or not, this is something that black people for years was a big thing in the black community. But we don't want to be stigmatized as, oh, black people are like this. Black people do this. Black people do that. Black people think this way. We don't want to be stereotyped or grouped like, oh, all black people are a certain way, because there were some negative stereotypes about black people that perpetuated for many years in the 80s and the 90s, even going into the 2000s. So if we don't want those labels put on us, we got to be careful not to put those labels on other people. Again, when people talk about this equality thing, it's a big thing people saying these days, equality. Equality doesn't just mean equality when you want to get something. It also means equality in the way that you're dealing with other people. So if you don't want to be stigmatized, or you don't want to be stereotyped based on your skin color, or based on what you do for a living, or based on where you're from, or what kind of clothes you wear, or what kind of music you listen to, you cannot stereotype other people just because, even if the person who saw you, they say, well, I saw somebody else listen to that music and they were this way, so you must be that way. You would say that's bullshit, right? It's the same way when you do it to somebody else. I saw somebody else who had on that uniform, or had that badge on their chest, or was doing that job, or it looked like you, or voted for this candidate, and they thought this way and they did this thing, so you must think that way and you're probably going to do this thing. That's bullshit. All right, we can't do that to people. Now, this requires a little bit of thinking. It requires a little bit of logic. It requires a little bit of rationality. Hopefully I'm not asking too much of too many of you. If you happen to be listening to this show, I don't think this is too much of a stretch. All right, we can't generalize and stereotype people just because of some bad apples, as the saying has been, doing these things. And people say, well, there's been multiple bad apples and this bad apple doesn't happen to them and that. And look, I get it. If that's the way you feel, that's the way you feel. Like, I'm not here to argue a court case. But what I am saying is, listen, there are bad apples in every group. All right, there are bad apples who are black. There are bad apples in the hood. There are bad apples in every walk of life. Every group that you can name, there's some bad apples in it. Okay, now whether you think it's right or wrong for them to continue to live or continue to have their job or not be brought to justice, whatever that means to you, or charged with a crime, etc., etc. Again, I'm not here to argue a court case. We are not going to blanket generalize any group just because of the actions of 1, 2, or several. Now, on the other side of things, you all lives matter individuals, or even if you happen to be having some all lives matter thoughts at a certain point and you say something like, listen, the cop had a reason for doing what they did. Maybe they had a reason for why they did it. All right, if you feel that way, that's the way you feel. I'm not telling you that you're wrong to feel how you feel. However, let's be clear. We got to make sure that we have all evidence of what happened in a certain situation, and we make sure we hear from the people involved before we start passing judgment and drawing conclusions as to why anybody did anything. All right, we can't draw the conclusion based off a 30-second video clip or a 2-minute clip when the actual situation was actually about 30 minutes or 10 minutes, and we only got a small percentage of the information. And when somebody loses their life, especially in a life being lost situation, all lives matter individuals, all right, you come out and your first response when all lives matter people, a life or death situation occurs, and we're talking death, and you come out and you start defending the police officer, and you say, well, if that person hadn't been doing this or this or this, then that person wouldn't have lost their lives. There is only one situation in which I'm all right with that, and that is when the suspect, let's say the black suspect, is doing something to threaten the life of the police officer, and then they get killed. I'm all right with you making that statement. If that person hadn't done this, then the cop wouldn't have had to do that, and that person wouldn't have died. All right, I'm all right with it in that case because they're defending their own lives. But if the person was not threatening the life of the cop, and you come out and say, well, they wouldn't have died if they wouldn't have did this, this, and this, now you just sound like an insensitive asshole. Even if you believe the person is wrong, is that the first thing that you could think of when you see somebody has lost their life? Like understanding that person has children, that they have a family, that they have a mother and a father, there's a community that they're from, they have friends. Imagine that was you. Imagine if it was someone close to you. Would you want that to be the first thing that people said about your loved one if that happened to them? Even if you thought they were wrong, is that what you would want the first thing said about them by somebody that you don't know? Of course not. So if you wouldn't want it to happen to you, as the golden rule is, do not do it to other people. You sound very insensitive. You sound like an asshole, even if that is your bigger point. All right, learn some tact. All right, there's a skill, there's an art to using it. You don't just go throwing that out there just because you believe you're right. Even if you are proven to be right in the long run, doesn't mean you just go throw your opinions out there just because you think people need to hear it. Point number 2. Today's topic is what Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter both get wrong in this social civil unrest that has been going on in America. Point number 2. What both sides get wrong. If you happen to identify with either of these groups, Black Lives Matter or All Lives Matter, I know there are a lot of people listening to this who do not claim either group, but if you happen to claim either one of these groups, these extremist points, neither one of these is on the quote-unquote right side of history, as a lot of people like to be throwing that phrase around these days. Neither side is on the right side of history, because both sides are far extremists who aren't really open to or capable of, as it appears, to hear what anybody else has to say, whether they're in the middle or on the opposite side of them. And that's a problem, because the truth in life is usually somewhere in between the extremes. Truth is hardly ever on the far extreme of anything. Does Black Lives Matter? Does the Black Lives Matter, any supporter of BLM, do they have a point when they say the things that they say? Sure, they have some points. Do All Lives Matter supporters have some points? Absolutely. They have some points as well. Both sides have points. But here's the challenge for both sides. Neither side is capable of giving any credit to the other side. Both sides, whenever they are confronted with arguments from the other side, Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, all they do, instead of saying, you know what, that's a solid point that you have there, Mr. Black Lives Matter, that's a solid point you got there, Mrs. All Lives Matter, instead of actually giving people credit for the point that they made, that they may have some justification for feeling how they feel, what the Black Lives, BLM and ALM people do is just argue even harder on their one point, thusly alienating the person that they could try to find common ground with, not giving any credit or credence to the point that the person on the other side could possibly be making, because that person is not all idiot and you are not all genius. All right, that's impossible. Why don't we ever hear about the actual truth? We don't ever hear about the actual truth because social media is programmed. The algorithmic setup of social media understands that people respond more often and more vehemently, and they are more triggered to continue to engage when they are angry, when they are fearful, when they are anxious, when these emotions are triggered. This is a psychological, scientifically proven thing. This is why Facebook became so popular. They understood this. The engineers knew this, and they used it to engineer their product to do this. The truth, which is usually somewhere in between the extremes, it is not very agitating. It doesn't induce anxiety. It doesn't make people fearful or angry, at least not in itself as it stands. The truth doesn't get the same burn that the extreme points get, simply because the extreme points get people agitated and excited. And what gets people agitated and excited draws their attention, and what draws attention, the money soon follows, and Facebook is a business. All social media platforms are businesses. This is why someone who is somewhere in between, who is illuminating the gray area in between the extremes, they don't get as much attention as a person who is just pushing really hard on one extreme or the other. This is just the way that it works. As the saying goes, a lie makes its way around the world twice before the truth even puts its pants on. Now, I'm not saying that BLM or ALM is lying about anything, but you understand the general point that I'm making here, do you not? This is one of the biggest challenges that I see with BLM and ALM. The problem is, it's really hard to knock down this challenge between both BLM and ALM, simply because the social media platforms that we have grown to know and love, and I guess we can even say trust, they amplify these things. They amplify the stuff that is, again, agitating, sensational, getting people hyped, getting people arguing. This is what works for them, and the people who are using it, which is us human beings, we respond to incentive. And the incentive is you get more likes, more retweets, more comments, more followers. You're gonna keep doing the things that led to that, and this is what leads to it. This is what they want, this is what they're asking you to do, because it's part of our wiring as human beings. Point number 3. Today's topic is what Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter both get wrong. It is not sensational. What's happening in the world when somebody's losing their life, when there is some type of political discourse, when there's civil unrest, and we're talking about people's actual lives, the sensationality of it is not the main point. Or again, we're talking about life or death. Social media and politics, ladies and gentlemen, they don't work on nuance. We already know that. They do not work on nuance. They work when you take an extreme point and you beat that extreme point to death. For example, has President Donald Trump, at least as of this recording, has he said some things that could be possibly taken as racist, or at least alluding to some type of racism in a roundabout, indirect way? Absolutely yes. Now, do I believe that Donald Trump is a white supremacist who wants to kill all black people and immigrants and institute a second Holocaust and put black people back in chains? Do I believe that? No. However, nobody wants to hear this because I'm not taking a side. Now see, All Lives Matter will be mad about the fact that I said Donald Trump has said some things that could be taken as racist. So I lost them when I said that. Now Black Lives Matter, I lost them when I said I don't think he's a racist. I don't think he's a white supremacist. I don't think he wants to put all black people back in slavery. I don't believe any of those things. So I lost them too. All right, but the fact is, that's the nuance. And that nuance exists in every argument, every point that can be made, especially when we're talking race, when we're talking any type of civil unrest, when we're talking politics. The truth is somewhere in the middle. There's a nuance in there, meaning, yes, this extreme point, there is some credibility to this point on the far extreme on this side, and there's some credibility to some points on the far extreme on that side. But the actual truth, when you blend everything in together, is somewhere in between the two. It is not on either far side. It's not part of either group. And this is the problem. This is why both groups continue to go back and forth. And on any topic, you got the extremes, they're just going to keep going back and forth forever, simply because neither side is capable of acknowledging any positive points that the other side has. Therefore, they can never come together. And at the same time, inherently or consciously, the leaders of these groups understand that the way to keep people engaged in their group, and to keep people buying in, and to keep people donating money, and to keep people showing up to the events, is to keep pushing the extreme points. That is what drives human beings. It's the dopamine hit that we get when we push again on that extreme point. But if you give somebody nuance, it's not exciting, it's not sexy, it doesn't get people engaged, it doesn't get people hot and bothered, it wears off. The effect of it just wears off too quickly. It's like a drug that's not strong enough. You got to take a little bit more of it, and more and more and more, and before you know it, you're on the extreme and you're an addict. This is the way that it works. This is basically how social media was engineered, if any of you want to know. Nobody wants to hear it when you're not taking a side. Nobody wants to hear it when you're saying, you know what, there's some nuance here. The truth is somewhere, this gray area that's in between the two extremes. A lot of people don't want to hear that because we have been programmed. No, you have not chosen. You have been programmed to look for the extreme and to engage and lock onto an extreme point. Why? Because that's what works for human beings. That's what works to trigger people. That's what works to get people excited. And that type of excitement and attention draws more attention. That's just the way that it works. Point number 4. Today's topic is what Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter both get wrong. I'm gonna give you some action steps here as to what you can do knowing what I've already laid out so far here today. What do you do if you want to find that nuance in between the Black Lives Matter extreme and the All Lives Matter extreme? I'm gonna give you a couple things to do here, 2 things specifically. First thing, stop reacting every time you see a clip or a story on social media. Let me tell you why. You need to stop reacting every time you see a video clip or some alleged story on social media. The main reason is social media is engineered, as I just said, to get people agitated, hot, and bothered and excited. That is what it's engineered to do. And you know what that means? You know what that entails? It entails taking the parts of a story, not the whole story, but the parts of the story that are most likely to get people agitated and excited and hyped up. Not the whole story, because the whole story usually has enough nuance in it that people won't get excited about it. It's just a story. But if you want to get people hot and bothered and excited, the things that are rewarded on social media, i.e. the things that social media rewards, what do you got to do? You got to give them the part that's going to get them agitated. Just the little part that they're going to get excited about. Then you can bring out all the facts later. By that point, everybody's already running around twice around the world, as I said already, before the facts even put their pants on. Do not react every time you see a clip or a story on social media. 99% of the time when you see something, it is not the whole story. When the George Floyd video came out, what was the video? How long was the video? Maybe 2 minutes. It showed George Floyd on the ground, saying he can't breathe, officer had the knee on the neck, and that was the whole thing that we saw. How long was it before we got the whole story? It was months before we got the whole story, but everybody had already reacted and passed judgment as to how they felt before we even had all the information. Again, why do people do that? You could say it's kind of part human nature, but another part of it is the programming that has been done to us via social media over the last 10 to 15 years. It is very hard to not react as soon as you see something that is made. It is engineered to make you react. All right, it is a discipline. And that's why this show right here is the perfect show for you to be listening to. And if you don't have your free copy of the Mirror of Motivation yet, go to mirrorofmotivation.com. Second thing you need to do, these action steps, do not be so quick to pick sides when people start picking sides. Again, another discipline that is necessary. Human nature is we want to join a group. Human nature is we want to be with our like-minded individuals. Human nature is we want to be a part of something. So I'm telling you here, do not be so quick to join something, to be in a group, to be a part of anything, to contribute to the us versus them dynamic. Sometimes in life, it makes sense to stay in the middle. Life contains, as I said, nuance and context. You know what context is? It is the full information of what happened, not just the bit or piece that somebody wants you to know or the part that you want to pay attention to. Full context. No one in life is all good. No one is all bad. So stop trying to put people in groups. Stop trying to put people in boxes. Someone has an opinion that you don't agree with. Doesn't mean that they're all bad. Doesn't mean that they're terrible. Doesn't mean that they're racist. Doesn't mean that they're an idiot. It just means that they have an opinion that you don't agree with. That's all it means. And maybe there's a good reason for them to have that opinion if you would shut the hell up and listen. So what if other people are doing it? Everybody else is joining the group. Everybody else is demonizing you. Everybody else is picking a side, and you feel like you need to pick a side so you can throw stones back across the lines at them. All right, you don't have to follow what everybody else is doing, do you? When I was young, adults would say to us, well, look, if your friend jumped off a bridge, would you jump off the bridge too? Of course not. So just because somebody else is doing it, or if your enemy jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge too? Just because somebody is doing something that you consider to be bad or negative against you, does not mean you have to retaliate and do it against them. Now, listen, I understand that it can feel good to retaliate. You may feel justified in retaliating. You may really want to retaliate. That does not mean you have to. There's a difference between wanting to and even having a good reason to versus needing to. You don't have to do it. Now, if you do something, you take ownership of your action. If you say the wrong thing and you end up penalized for saying it, you got to take ownership of that action. Even if somebody said the wrong thing to you first and you said something wrong back, all right, you still said something. You chose to make that statement. If somebody does something and you choose to respond and then something happens to you because of your response, you can't blame them for creating your response. They didn't force you to respond. You didn't have to do that. You chose to do it. So make sure you're taking ownership of whatever actions that you take, even if someone else did something that, quote unquote, forced you to reply. Nobody can force you to do anything. Point number 5. Today's topic, we're talking about what Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter get wrong. So now I'm going to address both sides directly for these last 2 points. Points number 5 and point number 6. First of all, Black Lives Matter. When you're talking about equality and you're talking justice, these are the two of the key phrases, the keyword phrases that have been said over and over again by Black Lives Matter. Okay, that's cool. If that's what you want, great. Your first step, Black Lives Matter supporters and fanatics, treat people the way that you want to be treated. I'm pausing there so you can let that one sink into your head. Treat people the way that you want to be treated. Do not vilify, lest you wish to be vilified. So what? That somebody did something bad last week, 3 months ago, or 400 years ago. The people who did that thing are not the ones that you're attacking right now. All right, so how do you look attacking someone else because of what a different person did? All right, if a cop did something wrong, then we address that cop, not the cops, that cop. And if it's ruled that that cop didn't do anything wrong, then I don't know, maybe take a second look at the evidence and figure out why the response was the response. And if it's one you can't figure out, come holler at me, I'll help you out if you can't figure it out. But you can't vilify unless you want to be vilified. What a person who looks a certain way did 400 years ago has nothing to do with a similar looking person who's alive in 2020. All right, what did they do? They didn't do anything to you. They did not oppress you. They did not enslave you. They did not hold you back. They did not block your blessings. So you can't be mad at that person just because they look like somebody that you saw in a book or on a website from a couple centuries ago. None of those people are alive anymore. All those people are dead. Every slave is dead. Every slave owner is dead. Ain't not one of them still alive to this day in America. Nobody. So make sure you're careful to not vilify people just because they look like, sound like, or do the same job as somebody that you think did something wrong. Because again, you wouldn't want anyone to do it to you. There are black people who've done bad things. Do you want people to vilify you because you look like them? Because you got the same skin color? Because you got the same sneakers on? Of course not. That would be stupid, right? So what is it when you're doing it? I'll let you think on that as I move on to point number 6. Today's topic is what Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter both get wrong. For the All Lives Matter side, let me address you now. I understand that the Black Lives Matter phrase may offend you. I understand that. If you are not black and you have never done anything wrong to a black person, you have not oppressed, enslaved, or in any way, shape, or form blocked or held back a black person from achieving success. But now, when you go outside to a restaurant or you get on the internet or you just are looking around and you see these people yelling Black Lives Matter and excluding you and your color, whatever your color happens to be, and you're like, well, hey, what the hell about me? What did I do wrong that you're screaming Black Lives Matter at me? And you may be offended by the Black Lives Matter phrase. I completely understand it. Now that I told you that I understand why you may be offended by it, because you didn't do anything wrong, and I believe you, now I want you to try understanding why Black Lives Matter is saying Black Lives Matter. It's not because they are trying to attack you. It's not because they are against you. It is because many people who are Black Lives Matter representatives and evangelists, they feel that black lives are being threatened. They feel that black lives are not getting being given the same value as any other color life. And they have some evidence to point towards it. Now, I'm sure you, All Lives Matter individual, you have some evidence to dispute that. You have some evidence that says, well, statistically, it's not like that. It actually goes a different way and is different. This thing happens over here. This happens over here. If you look at the stats, and it's not actually the way that many Black Lives Matter people feel. I 100% agree with you and understand the stats, All Lives Matter individual. The challenge is most people don't look at stats. Most people do not read. Most people do not think. And most people are lazy. Knowing this, actually, one more thing. Most people are more driven by their emotions than they are driven by logical, rational thought. This is true. You know this, All Lives Matter individual, do you not? Knowing this, understand that this is how some people just are. They just look at things in a different way than how you look at things. How about you try being a bigger person and understanding that? Understanding this, many people are just driven by emotion. They're driven by group dynamics. They're driven by hearing what some prominent person that looks like them says, and they just go along with it without thinking. This is what people do. Am I saying Black Lives Matter people, if you listen to me, am I saying this is what some Black Lives Matter people do? Yes, that's what I'm saying. There are many Black Lives Matter people doing this. I said this when I did the George Floyd episode in May of 2020. A lot of people are driven by their emotions. And I'm not saying that they're wrong for doing it. This is just how some people are. This is the way the majority of human beings are. They don't go and get all the information and read all the books and read all the articles and get 100% of the info before they start spewing out opinions. No, they just start spewing out opinions, and if they happen to get some information along the way, so be it. But if they don't, so what? That's the way it works. So all lives matter, people. Black Lives Matter people feel the way that they feel because they feel their lives are being threatened and they are not being valued. Even if you believe it's illogical, you can be logical and you can be smart, and you can be more logical and more smart than they are if that's how you actually feel. Point number 7. Today's topic is what Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter both get wrong. Last point. This is for everyone. On every side, no matter whether you're on either side, whether you're somewhere in the middle, whether you don't know anything about anything, and you're just listening to this right now trying to get informed. This is for everybody. Understand that there are multiple sides to every story. Okay? Anytime somebody has a story or a narrative, there's an opposite narrative, there's another side, there's another piece of information that's being left out. And the more emotional a person is, the more they are custom tailoring their story to fit the narrative that they have in their head. That means the more information they're leaving out, editing, adjusting, or adding on to the story because they have a narrative in their head. The more emotional a person is, the more you know, the more you should understand. And there's a whole lot more to that story that you're not being told. Everybody hear what I just said? Let me say that one again. The more emotional a person is, the more you can be sure that there are pieces of that story that are either not being told or are being changed around to fit the narrative of the person who is telling you the story. The truth, ladies and gentlemen, is usually somewhere in between the extremes, as I've said multiple times here today. Neither extreme is ever right. Ever. And the reason why neither extreme can ever be right is because they both take such extreme positions. They both dive so far into hyperbole that the things that they're saying can't possibly be true. And I understand why they're doing it. It is persuasive to use certain forms of hyperbole. All right, Scott Adams wrote a book about it called Win Bigly. It is persuasive to do it. So I'm not saying that they're wrong for doing it. Again, I'm just pointing out what they are doing so that you, wise, intelligent, logical, rational person, you can equip yourself to understand what people are doing when they do it. So if you ever been confused about why people use certain language patterns or why they're saying things the way that they're saying them when you can see things differently because you're not as emotional as they are, now I'm explaining it to you so you understand why. Neither extreme is ever right, but there's a reason why they're on the extreme, because they are who they are. Don't try to change them. It's not going to work. Just arm yourself and equip yourself with the knowledge of what I'm giving you here today. Let's recap today's class, which is what Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter both get wrong. And I don't even think I have to give any background on why I'm talking about this. Number one, when a cop on black situation happens, BLM says they're killing us every day. ALM says, well, the cop had good reason. They're both wrong. Okay? BLM is, first of all, generalizing a whole group of people, both the victims and the suspects, the people who did something wrong, allegedly, the cop that did something wrong. That is incorrect. All lives matter. Maybe you think there was a good reason for the cop to do what they did, but you sound like an insensitive ass when somebody has lost their life or their life has been severely altered, and your first response is to say, well, they probably deserved it because they did this or they did this. Maybe learn the art of tact, if it matters to you. Maybe it doesn't. Point number 2. Everyone taking extremist points. All right, when you take an extreme point, you're probably going to put yourself not on the right side of history, as a lot of people like been using that phrase this year, but on the wrong side, because you're taking an extreme stance, and the truth in life is usually somewhere in between. Do both sides have points? Yes, they do, but neither side is able to admit that the other side has a point, and that way, neither side can make a strong argument, as I talked about not too long ago here on this show, that if you want to make a strong argument on any point in life, you must be able to acknowledge, at least acknowledge on some level, some of the solid points that the other side has. I talked about this in masterclass number 1612, which is how to formulate and present a logical argument. And one way to formulate and present a logical argument is you must acknowledge that the other side has a positive point, at least some strong points. Point number 3, being sensational. Social media and politics do not work on nuance. They only work when you take an extreme point and beat that point to death and understand that this works. This is why politics is what politics is. Point number 4, some action steps. First of all, stop reacting every time you see a clip or hear a story on social media. 99% of the time, it is not the whole story. It's just the part of the story that they want you to know about to get you to respond the way they want you to respond. And point number 2, do not be so quick to pick sides in any situation, because life contains nuance and context. And usually when something first comes out, you don't have any of the nuance and zero of the context. You probably have negative amount of context. Point number 5, Black Lives Matter, people. When you're talking about equality and justice, understand that goes both ways. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Don't vilify people if you don't want them to vilify you. If people did bad stuff back in the day, that doesn't mean you can cancel it out or fix it, quote unquote, by doing bad stuff today. All right, don't be stupid. Point number 6. I get that the BLM phrase may offend you because you're not black and you're wondering why black people are excluding you when you never did anything wrong to black people. I get it. But try understanding why they are saying it. As I've explained to you, people are illogical, they are emotional, they don't think, they don't read, and they're lazy. This is how people are. All people. I'm not talking about black people. All people are like this. So you need to be a little bit more logical. And if you feel like you are more logical and smarter than the people on the other side, then be the bigger person and prove it. And point number 7, for everyone out there, understand that there are multiple sides to every story. The more emotional a person is when telling a story, the less chance that they are giving you the full story. And the less chance they even know what the full story is because their emotions are carrying them, not their rational logic. I told you a long time ago that emotion is a great gas pedal. It is a terrible steering wheel. There's a lot of people in life who are driving around their cars with emotion. They're going to slam right into a wall. Make sure you're not in the car with them when it happens. Don't be a crash dummy. Work on your game. Dre, all